Let's start by talking about the MLOps pipeline before we jump into all of the different steps that go into the pipeline. So typically when you hear people talk about MLOps, this is a very high level overview of what they mean when they say an MLOps pipeline. So we start by gathering our data, then we analyze it, we prepare it with things like feature engineering, and then we train a model, which is usually what the goal of our machine learning project is. It's to get a model that tells us something based on the data that we give it. And then we need to validate this model. And once it's been validated against other test data, we're ready to deploy this model to some type of production environment. So that might be through an API endpoint, or it might be through some type of batching script that gets run. And once this model is in production, we want to monitor it. So while it's in production and it's receiving new data and our business concerns are changing, we need to keep an eye out for things like data drift and concept drift. But we'll get into those in a later section in this class. So now that you have an overview of the MLOps pipeline, let's go ahead and talk about that first step. So first, we need to gather data. Before you do any machine learning project, you have to have some data available. So at this point in our MLOps pipeline, we're trying to make sure that we have our data from all of the necessary sources. So data comes from a lot of different places. You might have some kind of third-party service that you're paying for. Maybe you have access to the Facebook API, or you're getting data from some Google API. But wherever this data is, it's coming from somewhere external to your organization. And of course, you get data from databases. So maybe your organization has an application that has a database, or maybe you work around microservices and there's a lot of databases, so you need to compile everything from those sources. And some of these data sources might be online, some of them might be offline. You might actually need to get data from a specific server using hardware because it's sensitive information or something maybe in the health or finance industries. And you can also pull data from data storage like S3 buckets. So you'll see this a lot with images and audio files and videos that are used as data in machine learning projects. And speaking of that, data comes in a lot of different formats. So you might be working with raw CSV files, and that's where we'll start to do some magic with our data preparation step. You might be working with things in Hadoop or Hive or using Spark or any of those open source tools. So your data can be in any format. At this point, we're not too worried about what format it is. We're just trying to make sure that we get what we expect from each of the data sources. And to gather our data, you'll see a lot of tools that are used. Some are open source, some are enterprise. It just depends on your project and what type of functionality you need. But these are some of the really commonly used ones in the industry with Snowflake and Amazon Redshift. We have Redis Enterprise Cloud. These are just some that come up pretty often in discussions, especially those top two, just because Snowflake is pretty big with data ingestion, and Amazon Redshift is just a part of the Amazon services in AWS. So teams that are already heavily invested in AWS tend to go with Redshift. And I kind of mentioned data ingestion back there. So there's two parts of data gathering. You have your data ingestion and then you have data integration. So when we talk about data ingestion, that's when we get the data from all of those different sources and we put it in some type of central location or a storage repo so that we know we have all of the data we need in one place, which will make it way more efficient for us to work with. So when we ingest data, that's usually done with some type of batching scripts that get run at a set interval, or you might have streaming for your data ingestion. So as you get new data, it's immediately sent to your central source repo. Then, once we have the data in our central location, we do data integration. So this is when we make sure our data is compatible with the repo and with the existing data. So at this point, we usually turn to an ETL pipeline. So we get our data, we do some type of transformation to it, and we load it into that central location. And every now and then you might run into an ELT pipeline. It's the same steps that are normal with an ETL. It's just you load the data before you transform it. And sometimes this comes up just to help with performance issues. So once you've worked with data ingestion and integration, you'll see that most of the time they're coupled together. So you have your ETL pipeline, which is getting that data from these different sources, is transforming it, and then it's putting it in that central location. So at this point, you might even do some synthetic data generation or some data enrichment so that your ingested data can be integrated with your existing data. So if there's different formats or maybe there's different file types that you expect, you might go ahead and handle that as a part of your ETL pipeline.